Well, in between takes, I think you mentioned a book about editing that was interesting.
In the blink of an eye, it's one of the required reading books at the American Film Institute. It's written by Walter Murch, who's a very famous editor. And he has this theory that we don't blink randomly, but we kind of blink when we digest a chunk of information in our head, and that you should pay attention to your blinking rhythm when you are watching your edit and see if that kind of goes along with the exclamation marks and the commas and all that in your movie, and that you can watch an audience watch your movie and look at their blinking rhythm, and you know whether your story is well told or not, depending on whether that syncs up with your story or not. I think that's even a theory in dating, that people whose blinking doesn't sync up, that they don't match because their brains work differently and process differently. And I think maybe you know that from your own life. If you're telling a story to someone and that person blinks in the wrong moment, subconsciously you know that that person is not really listening to your story, and you know that something's off, even if you can't put your finger on it. And I think Walter Murch in that book kind of really focuses in on that and explains that.
Right. I mean, just a side note, I wear contacts, so sometimes I will blink because they're dry, but other than that, that definitely makes sense. Like if you see someone maybe look up, and I know there's different theories on where someone looks when they're telling you something, right, as to whether that's true or not. But have you watched people watch a cut of your film and been conscious of their eyes?
All the time.
Oh,
all the time, yeah. Because for some reason, I can't not watch my own movie if it's a screening that I'll do a Q&A after. I can't, because other people just go get a drink and come back for the Q&A and do the Q&A. I always have the feeling I have to watch the movie with that audience to get a feeling for their experience of it, so that I know we're talking about the same movie, because every audience, weirdly, I haven't figured out why, has a different experience watching the exact same movie. And you can tell that they are laughing at different moments, you can tell that they're in suspense in different moments. I don't know why that is. There's some hive group dynamic going on there. So to me it's really interesting to see a movie with that audience, and then I'm watching their reactions a lot in the dark, like a creep without them knowing. And sometimes I see them blink at the wrong moments, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had known that earlier. I'm losing them in that moment, or that and that moment. It's the same as if there is a joke in there and the audience doesn't laugh, and you go like, did the joke not work, or did you lose them somewhere along the line completely so that they didn't even realize that there was a joke, So it's a terrifying experience watching your movie with an audience, for sure. But the blinking helps.
I think it depends too what type of an audience. If you're watching it with people who are within the industry, let's say they're journalists, they see 3 movies a week. I think maybe there's a desensitization a little bit, whereas if you watched with people that they work 9-to-5 jobs and then that's their entertainment for the Friday night, they're going to be giddy and having fun if it's a comedy, or if they want to be scared, they're going to be maybe more high, because they want to feel something.
Sure. But of course, ideally, the hope would be that you can penetrate that cynicism, that you've created a story that is interesting enough and surprising enough and strong enough emotionally that even the guy that watches 3 movies a day because it's his job and he kind of hates having to watch another one, if you can get that guy to forget that that's his job for an hour and a half, and send him on that journey that he didn't even want to go onto, I think then you have a strong movie. I don't know if I've made that movie yet, but I know that that's kind of the goal, that it's not audience dependent, but it's so strong narratively that it would grab anyone, that you would have to be deaf, dumb, and blind to not be affected by it.
Right. And I've sat next to journalists who have literally jumped out of their chair at certain points. So that, not to say, and that was my bad, that they're disaffected, right, but I think in some cases we've just seen so much that, it is
They
hard.
can predict the narrative, and they can predict the turns and all that kind of stuff.
Right, but with this book, do you remember reading it? Do you remember, and what, besides the rhythm, I guess to me that's just fascinating. Now I'm going to be very conscious of that, even in just daily life.
But then you're screwed, because I was the same. After reading that book, I was, now I'm going to have to pay attention when to blink, and suddenly your blinking rhythm isn't natural anymore, and you've lost already. So you got to get that out of your head again as quickly as possible, and then whip it out when you're editing your movie.
That's true. Yeah, that's where sometimes ignorance is bliss, because if you know too much about like micro expressions and things like that, then you're kind of like, yeah, they're not being sincere. But when you went to AFI, that was required reading, and do you remember how different it was for you after you finished the book? How you approached being in the editing room and watching even other students see a rough cut of your films?
I think it just blends, and you're bombarded with so much stuff because there were 50 books on that required reading list. So there's all this stuff that I think you don't concentrate on one particular thing you've learned and then you apply it right there. But it's this library of vague stuff that will kind of rear its head. The details will rear their heads, hopefully, when they are required. And some of the time you don't even know it, but you have a feeling for, oh, I remember something about that. And I think with that, it was like that. I can't remember specifically sitting in the editing room and going like, let me look at my editor and count how often she blinks to see that we're on the same page and we're making the same movie. You know, it's just something you kind of vaguely remember.